Woohoo, says I'm live. Just gonna check on my phone, make sure I actually am. Yep, there we go. All right, so welcome back to session 2 in the Prioritize Protein Training series. And yesterday I shared my journey to how I became deficient in protein in the first place. And today what I'm going to share with you is how that specifically led to gaining a lot of weight, and then how I turned it around and how I figured out that it was actually a protein deficiency that put me in the position where my body responded in such a way as to feel like it needed to put on a lot of fat in response to the state created in my body, nutritional, like fueled by nutrition deficiency. So for those of you who are watching for the first time, there is another training series that you can get access to, and at the end, an upcoming training series as well. So I'm gonna, at the end, put a link where you can sign up and then get instant access to yesterday's training. And then also on one download page, you can get all of the trainings so you can watch them at your own convenience, and also so that you can get access to any resources. So if I talk about something in this training that, and I say, oh, there's, follow up with this link or whatever, I will put it on that one download page so that it's very easy for you to find. All right, so I basically am going to begin when I turned about 36. I think I was 36 at the time. And I had, at this point in my life, settled for being slightly overweight after having had children. And I explained in our previous session why women are susceptible to not being able to lose the weight, even if they're eating the exact same thing that they ate when they were younger, or prior to having children. So I had settled at about 155 pounds and just accepting that this is, I guess, my fate after I've had 2 children. This is just what, the reality that I have to accept. And the reason I believed that was because I already thought I was doing everything right. So I was like, if I am doing everything right and this is the result that I'm getting, then I guess this is just the, weight I'm going to be for the rest of my life. And I kind of like, went back and forth, right, between thinking, okay, I want to change this, but I also don't want to have to do the things that I thought that I had to do to release weight, or what I saw other people doing that I just didn't think was something that you could do permanently, right? So oftentimes when people want to lose weight, they just restrict calories and they start exercising like crazy, right? And of course, not only is that something that people can't typically, unless they love working out and love counting calories, will do long enough to maintain their weight loss. And then, of course, what happens is you become more nutritionally deficient as you're restricting calories and then stressing your body with the excess exercise and not fueling yourself properly, right? Ending up with even more weight gain than they started with. So I didn't want to do that. I'd already done the whole starve myself thing, prior to becoming health conscious. As a teenager, I would just starve myself and, do Denise Austin workout videos to lose weight as a teenager, because basically at the point of, hitting puberty, I just was always kind of like 15 pounds or so overweight. So, and actually now that I think about it, like that's the criteria of a teenager, right? Like I don't think of myself as even being overweight as a teenager, but I thought I was, because my idea was, this was the 90s. You had to be stick thin, right, to be at a good weight. So, it's all relative, right? And just like right now at this age, my idea of what is, an ideal body weight is totally different. So I toyed back and forth between just like settling for it. I wanted to I looked around and I saw that actually most women in their 40s and 50s are overweight. And I was just like, and then, most grandmothers are overweight. So I was like, well, maybe I can just accept that. I'll just accept that. This is what happens as you age, you get fatter. And I can just be a cute, chubby grandma, like, all the other cute, chubby grandmas that I was seeing out there. But then, of course, I remembered there is also a lot of people out there who are over 40, they're super fit, they're healthy, and they're not overweight. So obviously that's not how it has to be. It's just that that's common, right? So in our society, we normalize things that are common. So we, instead of, admitting to ourselves that there's actually something we could do to change our reality, we actually just go, well, everyone else is, settling for this and accepting it. So it's so common that, it must be normal. So I'll just accept it. And, it comes from things like being futile, like having tried a bunch of things that don't work, like I had experienced, or from also like more so what I've experienced was the idea that I already knew everything, right? So I was like, I already know what to do, and that's not working. And that's the best thing ever to do, which was to be on a natural whole foods vegetarian diet. So I assumed that that was the best diet possible. And I was already doing that. So if that made me obese, then obviously there's nothing that could be done, right? So futility, that idea of already believing you know everything, and just like having tried so many things that have never worked before, right? So a lot of people can relate to that. So I just got to that turning point where I was like, I have this decision to make. Like, I can just keep going down the exact path that I'm going down, and it will look like what most people go, the same path most people go down as they age, which is to lose muscle mass and to subsequently gain more fat mass in the process. And then, of course, it's not just the lack of muscle mass that leads to that. It's a whole bunch of different things that go on in our society that make especially women and men, but it seems to happen to women sooner and easier because of the stress of having babies. That hormonal balance, stems from also other things in the North American lifestyle, right? So like a lot of toxins that are, and not cleansing, and drinking alcohol, and just like there's just so many different stressors, right? Like stress directly will cause your body to store fat. So there's we're talking about diet here because this is one thing we do have control over, and we can all do better. And that's really important to, just accept, right? Is that not to get stuck in that idea, like you're already doing everything right, you already know everything, and you're doing everything perfect. There's always room for us all to, do better. So you can be healthier as you age. You don't have to accept that aging results in being overweight and being eventually sick, right? That's what that's what we see. And it's very normal, right? You see a lot of very weak elderly people who are out there, and you can see that they don't have a lot of muscle mass. So those people, on the other hand, that you see that are older, who have muscle mass and who are healthy and active, that didn't happen by just, like accident. That literally takes effort, right? Like a lot of times people will I remember seeing this thing that went out. It was like this little meme, and it was showing like a very elderly, crippled over person with a walker, and then another person of the same age who you could see was very strong and healthy. And then, I watched like all the different comments, and, and then you get like some people who are just like, oh yeah, that person's rocking it. Amazing. I'm so inspired. And then you'll get the other person who'll be like, oh, that person is just because they have better genes than the other one, right? Like, it's like, come on. You can literally see that person has put energy and effort into having that body. Like, you don't just get muscle mass in a noticeable way when you're doing nothing about it, right? So, yeah. So anyways, but that's, another conversation about the muscle mass thing. But yeah, we have a decision. We have a choice that we can make about how do we want to age? Do we want to age in an optimal state of health and continue to have health that is like the thing that is the most important thing that underlies every other desire that we have in our life. If we don't have our health, it's really difficult to show up in, your work, in your relationships, to live your passion, whatever. So all that just to say, like, don't settle for where you're at if where you're at is not the place that you feel like you're capable of being, right? Because why did you come to this planet? To settle? No, you did not. You came here to live, the best possible version of your life, to like expand and explore and live to your potential. And having optimal health is the most important thing, because as soon as you don't have your health, then everything starts to crumble, right? So, and it's not just affecting your body, it affects your mood. And then of course that affects your relationships. So it's everything. It's all interconnected, right? So anyways, finally, I accepted that clearly based on my results, okay, being on a natural whole foods vegetarian diet and being obese. Now I went from that being overweight to obese in less than 2 months, right? So I'd had 2 babies, I was overweight, and then I was like 155 pounds. And then suddenly in 2 months, I get on the scale at my mom's house. I see the number 176 pounds, and I literally feel the blood draining from my internal organs into my extremities. I literally go into fight or flight because I have no idea I hadn't realized this had happened. And I was just in like shock about it, right? Because I was like, oh my God, this means something is wrong with my health. Like, you don't just you don't gain that much weight in 2 months and have nothing in your life change. And you can have continued to do the same things you've always done, right? So my alarm bells went off, right? It wasn't just like, oh my gosh, I'm obese. It was like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong. Like, I'm clearly sick. Okay. If I could literally gain that much weight that quickly. Okay. So, I mean, sick, health and disease, it's on a spectrum, right? But I went to my worst, fear. My worst case scenario is like, something's really wrong. So, I mean, that night was like, I remember going back to the dinner table and people were talking, and it was like in a movie, all the voices were like muffled, the way you'd hear them in a movie or cartoon when someone's super stressed they've just heard some really bad news. That was real. Like, that happens in real life when you have that level of stress. That night, my cousin took a picture of, or I guess one of my aunts or uncles or parents took a picture of myself and my brother and my cousin sitting on the couch. And then my cousin posted it up on Facebook, and I saw it, right? Because I had not seen what I looked like. Like, I'm sure I looked in the mirror, but I was just not the kind of person who spent a lot of time looking at that. So I just didn't notice that I had literally gained so much weight. So then I saw it for the first time in a picture, and I was horrified. I was embarrassed, right? Especially being someone who had, been out there in the community teaching traditional foods and cultured foods and nutrition and how to heal your gut and all these things. And suddenly I'm wearing my health condition on the outside of my body for all the world to see. So I was completely ashamed and embarrassed, and I untagged myself from the photo. It was like, yeah, I did not feel comfortable in this body. To be honest with you, I really for an entire year, until I finally decided that I would figure it out. And that obviously I wasn't right because of my results. The results, like, I believed I was right. I believed I'd done everything right. I was doing everything right, but my results showed something different. Okay. And this is like, one of the things that we have to get real with ourselves about, right? When we think we're doing it all, like we know it all, we're doing it all, and then we're not getting the results. Like, really, there has to be a disconnect there, right? So, yeah, I just literally after that moment, I literally spent a year in that state of futility, did not do anything about it, because I had this idea that the thing that you do about it is something I don't want to do. So after, I decided to really get real with myself, I had to look at okay, I'm not going to be counting calories. I'm not going to be going and busting my ass at the gym, because again, I didn't have a natural affinity to want to do that. So I knew if I did that, it would just be temporary. So I decided that I was going to plug every single thing I was eating into FitnessPal. Not again to count calories, but to see like what am I actually eating? Like I need to be real clear about this. And one of the things that I saw was that every single day, no matter what, even though I was eating enough calories of whole foods, I was not getting enough calcium, magnesium, or iron, or protein. Every single day, no matter what. I was always low on those key ingredients, key nutrients. And I then also started to notice something else. I noticed, now I know FitnessPal has changed its, recommendations for how much, calories and protein and carbs and fat and everything that you should eat. Because when this happened, it was like, I'm 46. So this is 10 years ago when I had this realization and did this experiment. This was my experiment of one. So I noticed that I also was seeing a trend. Every time I ate the amount of carbohydrates that FitnessPal told me was how much I should eat, I would be gaining weight. Like I was literally like, I was doing this experiment. I was like just eating my normal diet. And then I was plugging it into FitnessPal. And then I was watching the scale, right? To see every single day, how is this affecting my weight? Now, the one thing we know is that, in one day, you're not going to be gaining fat necessarily. It's usually an up and down of water, but it doesn't matter because when your body will hold on to water in response to the foods you're eating, what that tells you is that food is triggering inflammation in your body. So what I noticed was it was every single day I was eating a starchy vegetable like a yam or a potato. I would literally gain 4 pounds overnight of water. Like my body was so inflamed because of that. It thought it needed to hold on to an extra 4 pounds of water to put the fire of inflammation out in my body in response to these normally foods that you would consider to be very healthy, right? So I was like, oh, wow, this is weird. And then I would notice that, it would show me the percentage of like what I was eating as calories. And then I would notice on the days where I wouldn't have that and I would eat more fat. So the carbs would go down, the fat would go up. Okay. Then I would literally start to see that I would lose weight. So my biggest realization out of that was this deficiency of nutrition, deficiency of protein, deficiency of iron, magnesium, and calcium. At that point, but I took note, right, of the how the ratios of carbs and fats were, making a difference. So I used that knowledge approximately a year later, the carbs and the fat. So basically that year, I came to the realization that I had been wrong, that this natural whole foods diet of enough calories was not going to provide the optimal amount of nutrition that I needed. So I just came to terms with that because I saw it from my very own eyes, right? It wasn't general, right? Like, it's like we're learning about all this nutrition information out there and we're thinking that we're applying it to our lives, but until we're actually, looking at the numbers, we don't know if we're really doing it because it's really difficult for people to really know how much they ate yesterday, never mind how much of different things that they ate yesterday and what those add up to nutritionally, right? So what I did was, okay, I'll add one little more part of the story in here that is relevant. So what I did was so at the time of me being obese, I get an email from somebody who's doing this holistic weight loss summit. And she goes, I know, Sherry, that you don't focus on weight loss because at this point in my life, I was helping people with their food sensitivities and their gut issues and teaching people traditional foods and how to make cultured vegetables and things like that. she's like, I just have this feeling that you should be in this summit. And I'm thinking to myself, I get this email and I'm like, oh my God, like this couldn't be the worst time. Somebody is asking me to do a training for other people about how to lose weight when I have just become obese and I don't even know how I ended up obese like this, right? So anyways, I thought, okay, I have this choice here. I can put my tail between my legs and be like, oh, I'm too ashamed of myself. And no, I definitely can't, do a talk on nutrition and, natural weight loss because I'm obese. Or I can use it to give myself a deadline to figure this out, right? Because, there's nothing like having, something in front of you that is, could potentially actually help other people to motivate you to do it for yourself, right? Just this is a thing, right? Like as mothers often we'll eat better when we're pregnant and breastfeeding because we know that our nutritional choices are directly impacting the health of our babies and our children. So I thought, okay, I have the opportunity to either say no and, just stay over here, all ashamed of how fat I am, or I can say yes to it and set this deadline in my head of when I'm going to get this figured out, because I need to at least not be obese while I'm giving a talk on natural weight loss, right? So basically I did it, right? Like I the one thing I knew is that anytime I had put anybody on a gut healing diet, or a cleanse of some sort, there's always weight loss, right? Because a lot of the weight loss resistance that people experience is due to toxicity. And also nutrition deficiency. So when you feed your liver properly, when it gets the nutrients that it needs and you stop giving it the things that are toxic to it, it starts to regulate your metabolism, right? And it starts to allow you to burn fat again because it's not overburdened by toxins. So a lot of people have hormonal weight gain, and it's due underneath that. The cause of that is sluggish liver, right? Your liver is just it's backed up. It's too sluggish. It can't get to burning fat because it's too busy dealing with other things. So you'll have problems with your blood sugar, etc. So I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So of course it worked because it always works. And I went from 176 pounds down to 163 pounds by the time I did this seminar, which got me into the just being overweight category, not obese. So, and I had just gotten results with my weight and I felt more confident to share what I knew. So at this point, I could only share what I knew. And all I knew at this point was that for sure, eating a natural whole foods diet is definitely the first step of attaining and maintaining your ideal weight. Don't even try anything unless that is the foundation underneath it. Like no matter what diet it is, right? Like if you're eating a keto diet, don't eat a junk food keto diet, eat a whole foods keto diet. If you're eating a vegan diet, don't eat a junk food vegan diet, eat a whole foods vegan diet. So I knew that was 100% the first step for everyone across the board. Why? Because we're human mammals. We're meant to eat the natural diet of our species, which is real food. So there's no way that can't be the first step. So there we go. First step. I had already had that first step in place, but it wasn't enough, right? So, okay, check step one, go to a natural whole foods diet, done that, still wasn't getting to the root of the problem. So next step, cleanse my liver. That was the next step. So, basically, all I did was I ate a diet of non-starchy vegetables for 21 days and also used colon cleansing foods. Basically, it's like a combination of psyllium husk and clay. And you basically drink this and take herbs at the same time to help support your liver. So that's what I did for 21 days. And I lost, 16 pounds, 13 pounds, 13 pounds, I think it is, in 21 days. Never to regain that back. But then I was, okay, now what, right? I'm at this next point. What do I do? So at that is when I put I created a diet for myself that was eating pretty much the same thing every single day. So that I could make sure that I was getting those macros correct, that I would get enough protein on my plate every single day and every single meal. Okay. And make sure I was getting enough calcium and magnesium and iron at the same time. So I'll tell you exactly what I ate. So for 1 year, I did not move from this dietary plan. It became boring after a while, let me tell you. But I also, in some ways, something boring is simple, right? If you don't have to think about it, it's easier to do. So for some people, you want it to be more complex, you can get more creative. For some people who just like it to be simple, here it is. So every single day for breakfast, I would have 3 eggs with cultured vegetables and an avocado. For lunch, I would have 2 pieces of swirly bread. I would make a sandwich with meat and cheese and lettuce or some other greens in the sandwich. And at supper, I would have 1 piece of meat, and I would surround it by cultured vegetables and non-starchy vegetables. And then after dinner, if I was still hungry, I would only eat raw vegetables. Okay, that was it. That's all I did. And that year was the year I reintroduced meat into my diet, right? Because I couldn't possibly get the macros right if I didn't add meat into my diet. Now, it's not like I ate a lot of meat, but these are very small pieces of meat, okay? Mostly adding up to something around between 20 to 25 grams of protein per by supper. My lunch and breakfast weren't quite as high. And I would even have, I would notice that even some things were too high in protein for me. And your body can, if you eat more protein than you need, and I was not active. Okay. So I didn't need as much of the protein. I wasn't building muscle. Right. So, I would sometimes have I would notice my blood sugar would actually go off when I ate chicken because, one chicken breast, the average chicken breast is about 30 grams of protein. So I noticed that I would be better if I cut a quarter of that piece of chicken off and not eat it. So, but yeah, every single dinner was centered around meat, and I got those macros right. And for the first time in my entire adult life, okay, I had the most hormonal balance I had ever even experienced, and inflammation gone. Okay. So normally prior to this, every time I would have my period, I would 100% know it was coming. It would give me symptoms. So this is another thing that's common in our society, but is not normal. And it's not natural to have PMS. It's just common because as a collective, we commonly do the same things, similar things that lead to similar results. So I would always get bloated prior to my period. I would get moody. I would have little breakouts. And then the worst part of it was I had this tension headache that would start mid-back, and it would go up all the way over to my, behind my right eye. And I would just be in pain. And in the early years of this, because this was happening the whole time, it wasn't when I made this change from a natural whole foods or from the standard North American diet, as I talked about in the last training, to a whole foods diet, yes, a lot of problems went away, but this one did not, right? Because the root cause of it was a deficiency of the one thing I wouldn't eat in my diet. Because meat is not just your essential amino acids, but it has all these other nutrients in it that are really healthy for you. So all this time I'd been told, don't eat meat because it's inflammatory, right? So a lot of people who have PMS get told don't eat meat because if you have inflammation and you're bloated and all these things and all this water retention, obviously you need to not eat meat because it's so inflammatory. Well, that's the exact opposite of what happened. I had all that inflammation go away. When my period would come, I'd be like, oh, wow, okay, I'm having my period. I don't no warning whatsoever, right? And then I would also, I no longer had to take ibuprofen anymore with every period, right? So for about the first decade or so, going through this period, issue and headaches every month. Maybe I don't even know if I lasted 10 years of it, but I was such a purist when I was younger that I would not take a ibuprofen, right? So I just suffered and suffered. And then at some point I realized I'm actually causing my body more stress by not giving it the ibuprofen, because I am now like suffering for 3 days, but I didn't know what the answer was, right? Because I thought I was eating the perfect whole foods diet, vegetarian, like best diet in the world. So obviously, there's nothing more I can do. I mean, I applied that line of thinking to everything. So it was just like, it felt like a miracle to me that I could literally just have zero symptoms around menstruation and like not get those tension headaches, right? Like I had like no inflammation living like that. And like I said, it didn't take a lot of meat. It just took a little bit. I just needed just that little bit of extra nutrition for, getting those important nutrients, and especially with the symptoms of period pain and like inflammation in your body, like headaches and stuff like that, the iron and the magnesium are especially important. So a year later, like now, mind you, remember I have never, when I was obese, I never was like, I'm going on a diet, right? So I accepted that it was going to take as long as it was going to take for my body to become in balance. And here's the thing that people do not do, and that's why they never get to their ideal weight, or if they do, they can never stay there, is because they will not accept that their body needs to prioritize what is going to happen when you start going into healing mode. You don't get to decide that your weight is more important than your period pain, for example. Okay. So your body decides what the priority is, and you have to put your health before this ideal of having a certain body weight, because you're not going to get there until you change that mindset. You 100% have to accept the weight that you're at and be accepting of it's just going to take as long as it takes to release that weight. And you're going to focus on your health gains. That's how you're going to know that you're going in the right direction and you're doing the right thing. Your symptoms are going away. Those symptoms going away tell you that you're making progress. It doesn't matter what the scale says. So I was not focused on the scale. I still didn't have a scale. Okay. But every once in a while, when I was at my mom's, I would check. So a year later, I lost another 10 pounds eating like that. Okay. So there was no dieting. It was just like eating a very simple, balanced diet and uncomplicated. Right. And although I did not really focus on like, I knew that I couldn't eat potatoes and yams. I'd also noticed I forgot to say, I also noticed that I would get that inflammation and that water weight and start gaining weight when I ate lentils and rice. Okay. And quinoa and things like that, and beans, because I was a vegetarian prior to that year. Right. So that's what I ate for my protein. And those are, so I took those out of my diet and I kept in the Squirrely bread. So I was still eating bread. Squirrely bread, it's the brand of bread that has, it's sprouted first before the grains are sprouted before they're cooked. And they're a little bit lower in carbohydrates. And the bread that I bought was the little bread. So I wasn't eating a lot of bread. So I got those results with still keeping even bread in my diet. But my carbohydrate count was way, way lower because I wasn't eating the typical foods that people eat when they're a vegetarian to get their protein. So after that, then I started to learn about the ketogenic diet from Dr. Jason Fung, who is a kidney specialist who helps people with diabetes, right? So he was an expert on fasting and things like that. And then because I was listening to some of his work, I learned that basically I was eating too many carbohydrates. And that is why when I looked at my macros, when I had plugged in what I was eating into FitnessPal now, like well over a year prior to that I, when I saw the fat content go up, that I would lose weight, is because what was happening was, as I would displace the fat, I would be bringing the carbohydrates down, right? Like I would displace the carbohydrates with fat. And that has a much better impact on your blood sugar levels, right? So learning all these things there. And then I was like, oh, wow. So then after learning from Dr. Jason Fung, then I started to hear about this ketogenic diet trend for weight loss. And I then became more open to increasing the fat in my diet even more and reducing the carbohydrates even more. So I wasn't keto in the sense of like, counting my carbs and all that kind of stuff. There were some times when I hit a plateau that I would play with it a little bit to see what would happen. And it does, of course, work. But that's not, what I'm promoting in my work with the Delish diet. It's not a ketogenic diet. It's just a balanced diet that is lower in carbohydrates. I call it being strategic with your carbohydrates, because how much carbohydrates you can tolerate is going to depend on your individual uniqueness, your activity level, your health, etc. Right? So there's not one way to do it, but in general, we do live in a society that emphasizes carbohydrates, the essentialness of carbohydrates, far too much. And what we think is natural around carbohydrates is not really natural for humans. Like everybody unless you're specifically intending to not eat a lot of carbs, you're probably eating a ton of carbs, right? So it's kind of like, I went into this actually in the last training, but I just want to give you an idea just to think about with what is natural for carbohydrates, right? So if you right now had to grow your own wheat and make your own bread, you would have to go and pick the seeds off the wheat stalks, right? And then you'd have to crush them and make flour and make bread. And you probably would not then eat bread for breakfast and lunch and supper, right? Because that would be a lot of work. You would naturally end up eating less of things like bread because they're harder to get. The fruits that you eat are all been hybridized. They're not that sweet in nature. They've been hybridized to be higher in starch. So if you're eating a modern banana, you're eating way more carbohydrates than if you ate a non-hybridized banana that is not as starchy or sweet and has tons of seeds in it, right? Again, if you didn't have the industrial food supply, right, then you would, especially living in places where it's cold, nothing I'm saying applies to Hawaii or wherever where there's fruit all year round. I'm talking about those of us who don't live where there's fruit all year round. It would be very difficult for us to eat a lot of carbohydrates, right? And the other example I gave last time was the wild cabbage, and how basically every cruciferous vegetable, like the brassicas that you think are all separate vegetables, are all actually from the same plant. A squiggly little green looking plant that doesn't look like it has a lot of starch in it, right? So those are just greens, right? You would just be eating, you'd literally be going out, right now it's November. I could find some weeds to eat outside, but it would be very difficult for me to have a high carbohydrate diet if you took away the industrial food complex. So I'm pretty sure that no, we're not meant to eat a ton of carbohydrates. So that basically leads me into why a high carb diet, whether it's one that's of natural foods or if it's of processed foods, it doesn't really matter in the sense of how it's going to affect your blood sugar and your weight if you have some certain underlying health imbalances, or if you don't have muscle mass or you're not active. There is just a ton of natural sugar in foods that you don't think of as being sweet. So basically for me, having eaten this natural whole foods vegetarian diet that was super high in starchy foods, even though it wasn't white flour, white sugar, and junk food and stuff like that, I still ended up with the results of somebody who ate that type of junk food. Because at the end of the day, if it's a piece of white flour bread or if it's a piece of whole flour bread, it still has a ton of digestive sugar. So if you go and research this on the net, this concept of digestive sugar, basically what that means is that when you consume a carbohydrate, and as it breaks down, your digestive juices break it down, it becomes glucose, right? So glucose is sugar. So your body does not care if the glucose you just got was from a yam or from white sugar off a spoon. If you don't have the muscle mass to deal with that, or you're not going to move to use it up, or you have, a liver that is sluggish and is not balancing blood sugar very well, a hereditary tendency to diabetes, if you have hypoglycemia, your body doesn't care if it came from a yam or like a teaspoon of sugar out of the sugar cookie, or a cookie out of the cookie jar, right? Your body does not, it doesn't go, well, this is a health food, and it's natural, so that means I'm going to treat it differently. Now, yes, of course, when you're eating complex carb foods like whole wheat bread versus, say, white bread, you are going to get the fiber in there. And that's going to slow down the absorption of sugar, so you can actually utilize that energy in longer periods over time, which is great if you're an athlete, right? If you're going to still, do you need it then, right? Do you need that much sugar for the rest of your day? If you're not, your body is actually going to be slowly releasing, it's like a time release sugar capsule, right? Where you're literally getting sugar released slower, then it's constantly elevating your insulin. And insulin is your fat storage hormone. So I actually had experienced, and I don't know if other people experience it so clearly in their body. Like I mentioned before, I can tell if I've had too much protein because I'll feel a blood sugar. I can feel it. I just feel it when sugar is just, not in balance on my body. So with, where was I going with that? So it's talking about sugar with the protein. So if you eat too much protein, you can actually, that'll turn into sugar in your body. So then you can actually have blood sugar symptoms. If you eat, so the time release thing, that's what I was talking about. So if you, okay, so say for example, right now, if I was to eat something that was had a lot of fiber in it and a lot of sugar in it, say something like quinoa, right? It's high in fiber, high in complex carbohydrates. And if I ate, say, some white rice, okay, that's not full of fiber. Now, if I ate the white rice, I find in my body that while I may get that blood sugar spike, I can it's high and it's fast, but then I can just recover from it, right? Whereas if I have the starchy thing and I'm getting the time release sugar, then I notice that it has more of a negative impact, over time. Now, remember that, and that negative impact could look like, now I'm just wanting to continue to feed that higher level of blood sugar in my body. I want to still, if I eat carbs, I crave carbs, right? A lot of people experience that. If you don't eat carbs, you don't crave them. Because once your blood sugar is up and then it crashes, it gets pushed down, then it crashes, and then that causes you to crave more carbohydrate to bring it back up. So, in my experience, and like I said, everyone is different. Everyone is unique. So I'm just explaining my experience, and hopefully that you can learn from it. And then just remember that this is also why, standard nutritional advice is never great for everyone, right? So for me to take the standard advice of eat snack all day to keep your blood sugar balanced, and eat complex starchy carbs to get that, right? The natural whole food starchy, complex carbs. My blood sugar would just be high all the time. And that's how it was. And that's how I ended up obese, because I was eating a diet that was basically my protein was beans and lentils, rice and lentils, beans, lentils and rice and quinoa, right? And then I would have like, potatoes, yams, and bread, right? And that adds up to a ton of carbohydrates. So when I was in my 20s and I had, less stress in my life, right? Less cortisol to add to the picture, right? Because you add stress to this, you can literally not even eat 1 calorie, and your liver can throw cortisol, or like from cortisol, throw sugar into your bloodstream and then have you gain weight without even eating an extra calorie because of the effect of cortisol on insulin. Cortisol raised, insulin goes up, sugar gets stored as fat because there's no use for it. It has no purpose, right? Like if you're not using that sugar, what's going to happen to it in your body? It has to go somewhere. It has to do something. So I was eating all these like high carbohydrate foods, and I didn't have the muscle mass. I was in my mid 30s. I had not been an athlete since I was 15, right? I used to play soccer when I was 15. And then that's about when I stopped. And then I'd never again been like athletic. So, I could get away with it in my early 20s. I still had the muscle mass. But I already at that point had symptoms of hypoglycemia. Okay. So it wasn't doing so well, but, I coped. I didn't really wake up to it until I became obese, when I suddenly was like, oh my God, like something is not right. Like obviously this hypoglycemia is like a bigger thing than I thought it was. So we're, in a society where everybody eats a lot of carbohydrates in an unnatural way, there's a spectrum of insulin resistance, of which hypoglycemia is on like the small end, the little end, right? Where it's not that big of a deal. Then you've got, your diabetes on the other side. And then in the middle, you've got all sorts of other symptoms of insulin resistance that people experience, right? So, and being overweight is one of those symptoms. It's right away. Like you could just know that if you are overweight, then you are taking in more of carbohydrate than you need, and it's being stored as fat. Okay. And then there's, it's not that simple. Like there's all these like underlying health imbalances that can make a person susceptible to putting fat on. But if we're just going to go on a big picture scale, what's most common with people is that they are eating too many carbohydrates, more than they need. So just to illustrate to you why this is so like real and relevant is that, this concept of digestive sugar, I call it inherent sugar. So it's the sugar that is inherent in foods. When you digest it, it breaks down into sugar. There's a lot of things that are considered health foods that people will actually start eating and prioritizing in their diet when they decide, I'm going to get healthy, right? So people right now who are thinking, oh, in January, I'm going to do my diet, or I'm going to eat healthy, they're probably going to put these foods in and not realize that it's not going to help them with their weight loss. Okay. If anything, it's going to make their blood sugar less happy, and put more strain on their liver and pancreas to balance their blood sugar. And they're probably not going to be able to exercise enough or get that muscle mass up fast enough to be able to tolerate it. So we're going to look at some of these foods. So we're going to go through quinoa, oats, and chickpeas. And what else have I got here? Lentils, potato, yam, and corn, just for, interest, because a lot of people do eat a lot of corn. And then bananas, because everybody's going to put that in their smoothie, right? Okay, so let's go through it. So 1 cup of cooked quinoa is 9.75 teaspoons of inherent sugar. So you don't have to add anything to the quinoa. And that's how much sugar you're eating when you eat 1 cup of cooked quinoa. So at any one time, if you're just going about your daily life, you need about 1 teaspoon of sugar in your bloodstream. So what's going to happen if you have 9.75 teaspoons of blood sugar, or of sugar into your body, but you're not going to do anything different than just your normal activity? Then that sugar is going to have to be stored as fat, because there's nothing else to do with it. It can't be stored. There's only so much you can store in your liver, and there's no muscle mass to hold that for later. So it's a crazy amount of sugar. And the problem is that because your body is always trying to eat for the optimal amounts of protein, you're going to end up eating probably more than a cup of protein in this high carbohydrate forms that we're going to talk about here. These ones that I mentioned, right? You're probably going to have that quinoa with something else that's also high in carbohydrate. So that's not just all you're getting in that one meal. We're just talking about that 1 cup of quinoa that goes in that meal. It only has 8 grams of protein in it. So if you're trying to get an optimal amount of protein, I'm going to give you like actual math that you can do to give you a better idea of how much you as an individual need to have as protein. But I'm just going to give you like a standard. So if you are like, an average size woman and you're not active, you want to aim for at minimum 20 grams of protein per meal. Now, that 1 cup of quinoa only gave you 8 grams of protein. So, you are going to get it up by adding vegetables and things like that, but vegetables aren't super high in protein. So you're going to get a lot of sugar in one meal, just trying to get that protein. So usually what a meal would often look like for people is instead they would do something like they would go, okay, I'm going to have like a cup of rice. Okay, so let's look at a cup of rice. 1 cup of cooked brown or white rice has 11 teaspoons of sugar in it, inherent sugar that breaks down into glucose when you digest it. So now you can imagine, let's have this rice with some lentils, right? Because we're gonna balance for protein here now. So we're gonna have 1 cup of lentils and 1 cup of rice. So we've got the 11 teaspoons of sugar that's in the rice. And now let's look at the lentils. 10 teaspoons of sugar. So now we're having 21 teaspoons of sugar trying to balance our protein from vegetarian sources. Okay, so we're dealing with now, and then we're looking at, I don't recommend that you start counting calories or anything like that, but I'm just going to give you, see how easily this can turn into weight gain, because you have not that much protein. And then, so the cooked lentils are better than the quinoa. Okay. So, but you're going to get the cooked lentils, which is 16 grams of protein plus your rice, your 1 cup of rice. I can't remember, actually, I didn't actually write that one down, but it's a better profile than quinoa when you mix the lentils and the rice together. But when you put them together, you're now starting with like, just for the lentils is 323 calories and 16 grams of protein, but you've got the 21 grams of carbs, which ends up being sugar that now you have to do something with, right? So yes, these complex carbohydrate foods are great for athletes or people with muscle mass. They're active. They're going to use this sugar. But the average person, especially a person who's overweight, who is not active, you have no purpose for that sugar. So it has no choice but to become fat. So you're better off to eat a chicken breast that is high in protein and low in carbohydrates, to pretty much none. Doesn't have any sugar. You don't need sugar because you're not really doing anything, right? And like I said, again, this is all going to be based on your individual level of health, how much tolerance you have for carbohydrates, and whether you're active or not. Okay. So, you don't have to eat like a ketogenic diet and have no carbs to lose weight. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying, if you're trying to get optimal protein on your plate and not get a ton of sugar, inherent sugar that comes inside of the carbohydrate food into your meal, then if you literally take an animal food and put that as the basis of like the starting point of your meal, which is kind of what our ancestors did, right? Like that's just how they did it. Then you build around that protein, right? So so instead of counting carbs, here's how I do it. This is how I keep it simple. I just don't eat starchy carbs on a regular basis. I eat non-starchy carbohydrates, the non-starchy vegetables. They're just naturally low in carbs, very close. The amount that you would be naturally drawn to eat of them is naturally close to the amount of sugar that you need in your blood at any time, right? Just keep it simple. And then keep the starchy things for like, you're going out on the night on the town, or you're having company over, or you're going out, for dinner at somebody's house, right? But you can't eat like that every single day of your life and expect to be able to maintain your weight easily. Unless, of course, you balance that out by restoring your muscle mass, right? So when you eat optimal amounts of protein, it's much easier to restore your muscle mass. So let's look at another health food that people will often go to. It's oatmeal, right? Oatmeal for breakfast. So there's only, in 1 cup of cooked oats, there's only 6 grams of protein in it. And there's 6 teaspoons of sugar in it. So it's not terrible. It's not nearly as bad as the other things that people would normally like go for, like the quinoa and the lentils and the beans and all that kind of stuff. But it's pretty low in protein, right? If that's your breakfast, that is not like enough protein to keep your blood sugar balanced. Okay. And that's how protein keeps your blood sugar balanced, is it displaces carbohydrates. It displaces excess carbohydrate in your diet, and it's satiating, and it stops you from overeating and throwing your blood sugar off. So it's extremely balancing to just start with in mind, like every meal is based on protein, and then you build around it, right? So for example, a meal like that, the oats, you could add, like, say, a protein powder to it to add the protein to it. But for most people, 6 teaspoons of sugar is still too much. Okay. So a young person could get away with that. But of, 40-year-old, 50-year-old woman, that would actually block her ability to release fat, because she has too much sugar she still has to use up. There's no reason to go into the fat stores. There's no purpose to, can't get there. Got to deal with all the sugar first, right? Chickpeas is another one, right? Everybody's super into hummus when they're trying to be healthy or lose weight. And 1 cup of cooked chickpeas is 12 teaspoons of sugar in it and 15 grams of protein. So if that's the basis of your meal, then you're going to have to add a lot more things to it, and you're going to be getting the sugar way past the 12 teaspoons, right? And then then there's the things that are high in sugar, inherent sugar, but hardly any protein at all, right? So we've got our potato, 1 cup of potato, 12 teaspoons of sugar, 1 cup of cooked yam, 10.5 teaspoons of sugar, and a banana, right? Because everybody puts the banana in their smoothie when they're trying to be healthy. And that's 7.75 teaspoons of sugar. Okay. And again, hybridized, right? Didn't used to be that sweet. So as you can see, some of these like health foods are counterproductive when it comes to weight loss. And when they're spiking your blood sugar like that, what's happening is it's becoming inflammatory, because when your insulin is constantly high, then that is inflammatory in your body, and then you'll have water retention, right? And then you have problems like heart disease, where your tissues are being harmed by inflammation in your body. And then, any inflammation, right? It can lead to any inflammation. It just depends on where the weakest link is in your personal system, based on hereditary factors or environmental factors. Everybody is going to be different how inflammation manifests in your body, but it's one disease. It's just inflammation. And then where it manifests is where we put a name on it as humans and call it this and that. But at the end of the day, if we ate right and we brought the inflammation down in our bodies, then our body could heal, right? In combination with all the other good things that we do for our body, providing it with what it needs nutritionally and on the soul level, and not providing it what it doesn't need, the toxins on the physical level and toxins on the mental, emotional level as well, relationships, etc. It's all part of the bigger picture of health. So I'm going to be putting some of this information that I mentioned into the resources that are going to go with this video. So at the end of this, I'm going to be putting a link where you can sign up, and it'll send you to a download page where there's this video, the previous one, and the ones to come, plus all the resources, so that you can follow up on this. Okay, so just looking at my notes here to make sure that I cover the most important things that I promised that I would cover. Okay, so what is the difference between these plant proteins and animal proteins, besides the fact that the foods that are high in the plant foods that are high in proteins are also very high in carbohydrates, and this is why they can lead to weight gain in those particular situations that I mentioned. I'm just going to repeat them again, right? Like, repetition is the mother of learning. So if you have not enough muscle mass to store the amount of carbohydrates that you're using for later, you already have a hereditary tendency, or your body's already started going off balance when it comes to your blood sugar, and you have insulin resistance. If you have any kind of health imbalance that goes back to the health of your liver, which also regulates your blood sugar, in conjunction with your pancreas, that is going to be a problem. You will end up with hormonal imbalances. And that will make you resistant to weight loss, in addition to just being too toxic and your liver being sluggish and not being able to do all of its jobs properly, right? So, there's many other things that are related, like inflammation, gut issues, lots of things. Okay, lots of deep deficiencies that we can have that make our metabolism sluggish, thyroid, adrenal, simple things like constipation will stop you from being able to lose weight, right? Because your liver is not going to release weight or release the fat cells when there's toxins in them if you can't shit them out, right? They have to go out. They have to be able to get out. So your liver's not going to break down fat cells and then be like, what do I do with all these toxins? Like, if you're constipated, it can't get out. So there's that. There's the difference between plant and animal foods because of that carbohydrate content that comes with the vegetarian forms of protein. That's an issue. There is also the amino acid profile that is in vegetable foods versus animal foods. So there are a lot of different essential amino acids, and your body can actually assemble a lot of them. So they're considered non-essential. Still needed, but your body can make them from other proteins, right? It'll take a protein and then it gets broken down into amino acids, and then they get reassembled into things, proteins in your body to build different things. And then there's the essential amino acids that are the ones that you need to get from food because your body can't make. And those come in animal foods, okay, in appreciable amounts. There are some in small amounts in plant foods, but not enough to get the benefits that you need when you need to heal. So when your body needs to grow, as in grow muscle, or heal, as in when your body is out of balance and you have a disease, or you just want to achieve optimal health, then you want to have optimal levels of the essential amino acids so that your body can work optimally, right? You don't want to have low levels of these things and have your body work substantial, right? Like what's the word? Like substandard. You want optimal. You want everything to be, you have to have the optimal supply if you want the optimal expression of what protein can do in your body, right? So your proteins, it's not just building your muscles but it's building your bones. It's building the cells of your immune system are built on protein. And then each amino acid has its own little things that it does in the body. It builds enzymes in your body that are catalysts for the things that your body needs to get accomplished, right? So you can either have that working at low efficiency or high efficiency. And your essential amino acids are essential if you want to be working and healing at high efficiency. So especially if you have lost muscle mass, as people do as they age, or if you are recovering from a disease or convalescence, you need to have higher amounts of these essential amino acids to heal. So that's why it's so important to, it's not just about the, getting protein that's lower in carbohydrates for weight loss. It's about healing your body, essential for healing. And of course, another difference is that your animal-based foods have more easily assimilated minerals in them and fat-soluble vitamins that are also essential for building your body, right? You want to have like a strong foundation, strength in your body. So it's essential to incorporate some of those forms of nutrients from animal foods, because even though you can get some of them, you can't get in plant foods, but some of them you can. But even when they're in a plant food, they're not as easy to absorb as they are from an animal-based food. And then all these vegetarian sources of protein, like the lentils, the beans, the quinoa, etc., the rice. Most people don't know about traditional food prep methods. They don't realize that there are certain ways that you have to prepare those foods that eliminate the anti-nutrients that block the absorption of minerals, right? So here you can be eating this food thinking, oh, it contains that, but if your digestion isn't healthy, and this is even worse, if you're also not preparing that food properly, you're actually causing more inflammation in your gut, making it even more hard to absorb those nutrients. So you're eating all the best food in the world, but you're not absorbing the nutrition. So especially if you are struggling with a health issue, incorporating meat in your diet, in eggs, even in like small amounts, can make a huge difference in your body's ability to absorb nutrition and heal. And to be honest with you, in my experience of working with people with gut health issues for a very long time, including my own son, who after I didn't have the knowledge of traditional food prep, and I was a vegetarian when he was a young child, I was feeding him oatmeal every single day, not properly prepared. And oatmeal is one of the highest in phytic acid that binds to minerals and causes inflammation in the gut. And he ended up with extreme eczema from that, which we healed by healing his gut. And yeah, there's so many things that we just don't realize when we do something that's outside of like the natural human diet, that there is going to be consequences to it. So, when a person is having health problems, they make assumptions about things they think that aren't good for them because of how they feel eating them. But they don't realize that food that they're feeling bad eating is not the cause of the problem. It's something underneath it that's the cause of the problem. So what you want to do is go deeper than that. Don't just eliminate foods from your diet. Find out why your body can't digest that food. So if you have an aversion to meat, it can be a low hydrochloric acid or low bile. Same thing if you can't tolerate fats, low bile. So, then do you want to live your life with low bile and low hydrochloric acid and have a hard time absorbing nutrients from other foods that you do digest better, but you're not going to digest and assimilate that great either if that is low? So you want to actually deal with the root cause of the problem. Restore your HCl, get your gallbladder, get the stones out of your gallbladder, get the liver working optimally so it's producing enough bile and there's room in the gallbladder for it to store it so you can digest your fats again. If you can't digest a certain food, you have a food intolerance or a food sensitivity. If you have a food intolerance, it means that you have low digestive enzymes. You need to restore like nutrients specifically that are in animal foods in appreciable amounts, like magnesium and zinc are essential for building the stomach acid, right? So when people avoid meat or avoid foods, the underlying imbalance just continues to get worse. It doesn't get better. And that's why you'll see people who have food intolerances eventually end up with food sensitivities. And once somebody's sensitive to one food, they've got this inflammation going on in their gut, then they slowly, that inflammation, they just avoid the foods that they're sensitive to, but the inflammation continues on. So then they have more and more foods they can't tolerate. And that's what happened to my son. So he's at the point where every single thing he ate caused extreme inflammation in his skin. And it was horrible. It was a horrible experience for me to go through that with him, because again, I had that mentality, like, how could this happen? I'm feeding my child the perfect diet, right? Like, he's eating this natural whole foods vegetarian diet. If he ends up with eczema, and then they were like, oh, he might be celiac and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, I think I'm doing everything right, but it's turning out all wrong, right? Anyhow, he's fine. We healed him, but it took me another year of trying everything but doing a leaky gut diet to heal him, because I was just like, I just didn't want to do it, right? It's like hard. These things are hard. It's not easy to heal at the level of root cause, right? Because when something is so out of balance, you have to do something extreme to bring it back into balance. Nobody wants to eat a protein smoothie with non-starchy vegetables and fruit for like months on end, right? But sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes other diets, for example, like the GAPS diet, which helps people with food insensitivities and tolerances and, mood disorders and all those kinds of things, that heals the gut. Some people stay on it, committed to get every single thing that they couldn't digest before digestible again. And that can take like 2.5 years, right? But a lot of people just don't want to do the more extreme things. So they kind of settle for just tolerating the level of health that they have in their body. And again, just to like remind you that there is always a mental, emotional, like side of these things. And it's not just about the diet, right? You want to, when something goes wrong with your health, you want to look at like, how can you use this as a catalyst to transform your life? Like find out like what is also the metaphysical cause of what has weakened you, not just like your diet and lifestyle, but what has weakened you emotionally and spiritually and mentally that has made that particular area of your body more susceptible to being broken down by inflammation. And that's how you get out of victim mode when you are diagnosed with a disease or you have symptoms that you don't like, is you have to find a way to get excited about healing yourself. Like how your life is going to change, right? How you're not going to settle anymore for everything, right? It's one thing to just go back to not having the symptoms, and it's another to literally transforming your life and your paradigm and your perception of, who you are and what you're capable of and what your body's capable of. It's kind of the only way to do it. You got to take your health into your own hands and not, look for someone else to fix you or a pill or, an expert. It's okay to go to, experts and books and stuff like that to get information. But at the end of the day, you need to get involved, start looking at, the other things like the inner work and, the permanent lifestyle transformations that you need to make in body, mind, spirit, everything. Because that's how the healing really sticks, right? Because you change, right? If you're a different person after, like if you make yourself a different person in the healing process, then you are not going to have those same symptoms because you're not the same person anymore. And I mean, I think that's what we all want, right? Is to, always be that next level of ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to end this on one last thing that I promised, which is to give you an idea of how much protein that you need on an individual level. So the recommended daily amount, which is the minimum, it's not it's just to prevent overt deficiency symptoms and diseases, is 0.4 of your current body weight. So you literally get out the calculator, take your weight currently, times it by 0.4. That's how much protein that you should get spread out through your day between 3 meals. Now, there's other research. And again, this is like, when we're talking about nutrition science, it's always like something general, trying to apply it to everyone. It doesn't take into account, all of your unique individual things, right? So these are just some guidelines and things to think about. So this research is based on getting people's protein to an optimal levels to maintain and rebuild that optimal muscle mass, right? And as you age, you need more protein than when you're younger, because when you're younger in your 20s, you have hormones that help you keep muscle mass. And as your hormones change, those hormones aren't as efficient at keeping your muscle mass. So you have to actually eat more protein to maintain your muscle mass or to build muscle later in life. And that ideal amount is 1 gram of protein per pound of your ideal body weight. So the other one was based on your current weight. This one is based on your optimal body weight. So whatever you believe is the right weight for your body type is the amount of protein that you should get spread out throughout the day for optimal health, to restore your muscle mass and to maintain optimal muscle mass. And if you have no idea what that is, you can literally just Google body mass index, put in your height and your age, and it will tell you like an amount between. It's not like an exact science, but like an ideal of where your ideal body weight would be with optimal muscle mass. And from there, you can start to literally every time you go to make a meal, just start with a thought like, okay, what's going to be the center of this meal? It's going to be something that is high in protein, preferably something that is high in the essential amino acids. So you want to put some animal foods on your plate, and then build your, if weight loss is a concern, then build your starchy vegetables around that, or sorry, your non-starchy vegetables, not your starchy ones. The non-starchy ones are the ones that are like, they're lighter, right? Like broccoli, cauliflower, your greens, like basically anything that's like not like, let's just say what starchy are, because it's easier. All the vegetables are almost non-starchy. So there is no shortage of vegetables that you could eat. The starchy ones are your corn, beets, carrots, squashes, and then potatoes and yams, right? And like I said, it's not that you should never eat them. It's just that if you understand how high in inherent sugar they are, then you can be the judge of what works for you based on doing an experiment of one, see what happens when you eat them. And sometimes it's just eating less of them, right? Because you just don't have to eat the same amount of that. You don't have to eat like 5 carrots, but you could take a half a carrot and like grate it on your salad and still enjoy a carrot, right? But again, carrots, one of those things too that has used to be like so like gritty, grainy, like before it was hybridized, that you wouldn't even want to eat it. They've made it like almost like a fruit. It's so sweet, right? So surely you can live without a carrot. If nature didn't even provide a carrot, I'm sure you can live without a carrot. So yeah, just like centered around protein, non-starchy vegetables, and then you got to put some fat on your meal. That is what's going to satiate you. That fat is going to help you to absorb the fat-soluble vitamins and the minerals. So don't avoid fat. You can put butter, you can put creme fraiche, you can get sour. There's somebody who is now making comments on, there we go. We just had a what do they call it? The troll. And your fats could be like sour cream, creme fraiche, butter, mayonnaise, preferably homemade, because pretty much all vegetable or all mayonnaise that are out there are made of poor quality vegetable oils, and vegetable oils are super unhealthy for the health of your liver, and they drive up inflammation. So it's best to like make some nice homemade mayonnaise with olive oil if you're going to eat a lot of mayonnaise. You can also mix it with like coconut oil. You can use MCT oil. Some people don't like that really olive oil taste. I do. But yeah, you can mix it with other oils if you have to cut it a bit. And yeah, cultured vegetables, of course, right? You need to put cultured vegetables with your food, because that restores the beneficial bacteria in your gut. It provides some good acid that helps you digest the protein properly. And then all those non-starchy vegetables and your cultured vegetables together are going to help alkalize your blood. So you don't have to worry about meat being so acidic, right? Because there's another, myth out there that, if you eat too much meat, you're going to get gout. It's too acidic, all these things. It's like, no, it's just, you need to eat balanced meals, right? And how you balance that is you eat alkaline vegetables. So always coming back to balance, right? And sometimes we do extreme things when, we need to, if you really were super acidic, then, you may want to do some like juice feasting for a little bit to get, acids out of your body, but then come back to eating a balanced diet, right? That's how you maintain your health. All right. So again, if you want to get some of the resources that I talked about today, I'm going to be putting them up on the download page so that you can, remember some of these things you learned without having to watch this entire video again. And I'm going to be putting that in the comments in the live streams. And then you can get access to yesterday's training and then the upcoming trainings in this series called Prioritize Protein. All right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.